The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, sat before Congress and refused to say whether the Trump administration had plans to deploy active-duty troops into more U.S. cities. It had already happened in Los Angeles, Marines patrolling American streets, protesters, not enemies, citizens, not combatants. And instead of offering legal clarity or constitutional reassurance, Hegseth deflected, dodging basic questions about transparency, law, and the militarization of dissent.
Secretary Hegseth, you've been asked about options for the use of force abroad. I want to ask about the use of our military at home. I have been deeply disturbed and alarmed by the use of active duty troops, Marines, in Los Angeles, and President Trump has made clear his intention to continue to use the military to suppress dissent and likely inflame tensions there and elsewhere, all under the guise of enforcing the law. What he's doing may well be illegal. I want to ask you about contingency plans for the use of active duty military in other cities. Do you have such contingency plans?
Senator, I would just say we share the president's view that, as you characterize it, we are deeply disturbed and alarmed that ICE officers are being attacked while doing their job in any city in America. And so allowing National Guard or active troops under existing authorities to defend them is important.
On ICE officers, yes, but we ought to be equally alarmed by the illegal use of active duty Marines or other military. I take it from your answer that you do have contingency plans for the use of military in other cities.
We have never and will not illegally deploy troops. All have been under existing and well-established authorities to use troops to support federal law enforcement officers.
So far, there's been no legal justification. It's been challenged successfully. I think that it will prevail. Those challenges will prevail in the courts. And I want to ask you right now to submit to this panel those contingency plans for the use of active duty military in other cities. I want to move on to another area of questioning. The chairman has said that you've submitted precious little detail, to quote him, precious little detail about the budget. I think there is no detail. This budget is literally a rough outline with short-sighted shortfalls. For example, the shortfall on the Columbia class, $2 billion. Only about $1 billion for Virginia class. There is virtually no outline or specificity as to how you are going to provide drones to defend and also engage in offensive outline and maneuvers. The nature of warfare is changing right before our eyes in real time. Unmanned aerial and undersea warfare is happening in Ukraine and elsewhere, and I think that you owe this committee and the American public more specificity in that budget, because we will be at risk, we are at risk right now, in the Middle East. And I want to know whether we have contingency plans to protect our U.S. personnel in the region from the kind of swarm of drones that have proved devastating already to 3 of our service people in the Middle East on a base in Jordan. Do you have such plans to protect against drones there?
Senator, we work hand in glove with the Joint Staff and CENTCOM and every COCOM, especially right now, to ensure everything at our disposal is available to ensure maximum force protection against any contingency, including the one you described, sir.
Well, I have no assurance that we have the capacity to safeguard against the swarm of small, lightweight, slow-moving drones that are, in my view, our major vulnerability. And right now, if we engage in the Iran conflict, would put us and U.S. personnel at risk there. Let me ask you about Ukraine. I've just returned from my 7th trip to Ukraine. I am the advocate, chief sponsor with Senator Graham, in the Russia sanctions bill, you said that the United States and the ranking member cited it, that we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective and will only prolong the war. My question to you is, when will you release the PDA $4 billion in equipment that Ukraine desperately needs? It's sitting there. Ukraine deserves it. When will it be released?
We're aware of PDA 75, and that is a decision we can make in the future.
My time has expired, but I don't consider that answer adequate.
Thank you.
To understand why this moment mattered so much, we need to rewind a bit. In the aftermath of widespread protests, the Trump administration deployed active-duty U.S. military personnel, including Marines, into Los Angeles, not to fight terrorism, not to defend against invasion, but to control dissent. That decision raised alarms across the political spectrum, from civil liberties advocates to constitutional scholars. Because the Posse Comitatus Act, a core legal safeguard, is supposed to prevent the military from acting as domestic law enforcement. But in that hearing room, Pete Hegseth, a nominee for Secretary of Defense, refused to say whether this deployment would be repeated in other cities. That wasn't just an oversight, it was a signal, a sign that the administration was willing to blur, or outright ignore, the lines between law enforcement and military power. And when the senator asked Hegseth to submit those contingency plans to the committee, he danced around the request. Why wouldn't he just say no? Why not rule it out? Why not draw a clear line between military defense and domestic repression? Because that line had already been crossed. And here's what many Americans didn't realize at the time. Once the government begins using military force to manage protests, it creates a chilling effect. It tells people to stay home, stay quiet, stay in line, or face the might of the world's most powerful military on their own streets. It also sidesteps local law enforcement accountability, giving federal actors the power to act without local oversight. That's not democracy. That's a creeping form of authoritarianism. And when these actions go unchecked, when officials like Hegseth refuse to be transparent, it sets a precedent, a dangerous one. It teaches future administrations that they too can use soldiers to silence citizens, as long as they use the right words to justify it. That's why this hearing wasn't just a footnote. It was a test of constitutional guardrails, a test of our leaders, a test of whether Congress and the American people would demand accountability when it mattered most. If we want to preserve a democracy where dissent isn't punished and protest isn't policed with rifles and boots on the ground, we have to pay attention to moments like this. Because history doesn't just repeat itself, it whispers first. And this was a scream we should never ignore. Subscribe to Liberal Lens because we follow the power, ask the hard questions, and remind America of what's at stake when silence becomes complicity.